Hello friends, Remington here. Our guest today is Hema Vyas. She is a Ayurvedic life guide and well-known lecturer on spirituality, human consciousness, heart wisdom, and wellness. Hema's clients credit her for generating the room needed to expose previously unarticulated opportunities found deep in our hearts. She has created quote-unquote needle-churning solutions to previously hard-to-solve challenges in both personal and professional forums. And she bases her philosophy on the knowledge that by bridging together the four parts of the human anatomy, the heart, mind, body, and soul, people can achieve greater well-being, creativity, and prosperity. Born in Kenya to Indian parents, Hema hails from a long lineage of Vaidyas, also known as Ayurvedic doctors. From a young age, she realized that she is an empath and was naturally attracted to helping others. During her time as a professional psychologist, she has worked with numerous people and groups who shared their understandings of the marvels of self-knowledge. To connect to your true prosperity, follow the unique wisdom of your heart. In her own words now, she says, as a professional psychologist, I have worked with countless individuals and groups shedding light on the magnificence of knowing our hearts. Time and time again, I see that by finding and following the unique wisdom of their hearts, each individual connects to their true prosperity, which encompasses the 5 pillars of health: love, wealth, passion, and purpose. You can find her on hemavyas.com. That's spelled HEMAVYAS.com. You can find her on LinkedIn at Hema Vyas, also spelled the same. Instagram, she is the Hema Vyas. And on YouTube, I'll have the links in the show notes because it's one of those long YouTube channel links. You can also find her on heart-resonance.mn.co. Please enjoy this conversation. It was obviously very heartfelt, but we did really have just a very deep conversation about the heart, about consciousness. So many interesting things came up, material things, the ego, ethics, how to achieve this lightness that everyone talks about, equanimity, the art of fantasy, yoga, breathing. Just a very rich conversation, so please enjoy. Okay, today I have with me via audio, which is a new test, kind of to see how that comes across, is Hema. How do you say your last name? Hema Vyas?
Vyas.
Hema Vyas. Thank you. Yeah, I will do the introduction, like I just said. So,
Great.
Hema,
Wonderful.
thank you very much for taking the time to have a conversation with me. You talk a lot about the heart and what you do, and that's such an interesting. I guess there's just so much you can go into when you talk about the heart. And I can hear it in your voice and the other conversations that you've had that you are a very empathic person. I feel like I am too. I think all humans have this ability, but some people, they tend to, I don't know. I mean, I've even had, I could say I've had a massage
Mhm.
with someone that was empathic, and it wasn't like she was even doing any type of different deep tissue muscle massaging, but the energy that she was delivering afterwards. I remember my wife having the same massage from the same woman,
Uh-huh.
and then getting up after the massage and looking and saying, "Wow!" And she's like, "Yeah, I know," like she knew that she had spent her energy on me, and I was so grateful for that. I don't know why I just thought that just popped in my mind when we talk about the heart and talk about this human consciousness that's like something I really want to talk to you about as well.
Wonderful.
um
Wonderful. I love your story. I think there's something to be said for the impact that empaths have. And it's not just about, being able to feel people or understand them on a more deeper emotional level, but it's the energy that you give as an empath, as well as what you're able to pick up and feel. So I think that's really beautiful to share how the massage was sort of more profound as a result of that person being what I would call heart-centered, being in their hearts.
yeah, being in your heart. being,
Mm-hmm.
it's something I guess, if there's two ways to look at it for me. Like, if you're already there, you know you're there, and if you're not
Mm-hmm.
there, you have no idea how to get there. It seems like so. Uh, it seems very confusing in a way. If you're in a state of mind where you're stressed or you're having a hard time, it's it's the worst moment to think, well, how am I going to stop everything and go back to my heart? And I guess how you know I don't want to just ask you straight the question, how do you do that? Because I think your own story, if you were to kind of start with how you got into your own spiritual, like talk about your own spiritual journey,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we can kind of hear how you worked with yourself and how you work with other people, and I've kind of heard out that you have sometimes you had to realize that, like, you had to figure out your own energy and your own center to be able to help people with finding their center, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think that would be a lovely place to start. But I think as over the years, what I have learned and developed is tools to help people, find their way. But you're right, you can't do it in the moment when you're in that deep stress or when you're in a sort of trauma of any sort, then it's hard. So, this is something I think we need to learn to do as humans um, before we get to that point. And this is something I'm, really passionate about, helping people understand that, the journey begins long before the journey begins, so that you're ready when those moments appear, when because at every person's life there's going to be times when things get difficult and challenging and overwhelming, and if you have the tools already at hand, you're going to be much more prepared to deal with it in a healthy and conscious way. um, but thank you. I'd love to share a little bit of my story, but I would say I was definitely one of those people, as I imagine you are, that was born empathic. And maybe that was to do with my genes, maybe it was to do with sort of residual energies from past lives, depending on what you think and believe. But I definitely came into the world very, very empathic. I remember being a very young child asking questions that I now learned that a lot of people do, ask questions about what's happening in the world and about poverty and other children and why are they suffering and I'm not, and these kind of questions. But I was very conscious of being that child who sort of, we lived where, so I was born in Africa and then didn't spend very much time there, moved to India very early on, and we had a very big family house where everybody else on the street sort of lived in sort of what I would say sort of almost poverty, but not quite. Um, and I remember asking the question, well, why are we here and they're there, and not really being able to compute the differences, and just and really feeling like I needed answers. And I think that's been part of my journey. I've always been inquisitive, I've always been curious, and I've always wanted to understand the nature of reality and the nature of the differences that people experience. Why do some people suffer, others don't? Why are some people blessed in certain ways, others aren't? And how do we balance it out, and how do we get to a place of peace, but also how can we elevate ourselves and others? Because I think that I want to live in a world where I'm not only blessed, but others around me are blessed, and others in the world are genuinely blessed. And I think it begins with understanding the heart. And so that's, how my journey sort of started, asking lots of questions, but also coming from a quite a sort of spiritual but non-intrusive family. So, spirituality or religion was never imposed on me. It was just part of my life that I sort of grew up with. And then as the years evolved, I realized there was something to it. And then started my own education in really understanding Ayurveda, which is the Indian kind of philosophy of life. It's a way of living. And it's so much more than just healthcare. It's a whole spiritual system of understanding the world and consciousness. And so it opened up the question, well, everybody talks about the brain and everybody talks about consciousness and where does it exist, but where does the heart come into it? Because, all poets talk about heart, and, and it's such a big part of us. When people talk about something, they're really passionate about the point of the heart as opposed to the head. So all of these things were sort of going on in my mind, and it was making me sort of think, well, there's just no books and nothing really spoken about. I'm going back sort of 30 odd years.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I want to understand the heart more. And so that was the sort of, if you like, but also because I grew up in England eventually. So I moved from India to England when I was very young, about 6 years old, 5-6 years old. And there was, none of that. So that's where I started studying psychology. So I think I bring a lovely balance of the East and West, the academic and spiritual, and a balance of, the sort of scientific way of looking at things, but also the spiritual way, the sort of ancient intuitive way, and bringing all of it together in the work that I now do.
Yeah. And you've been you're a psychologist, and
Yes.
when you started out as a psychologist, did you? I don't even know really where you start there. Like you get out of school and you probably work under somebody for a while in the Western world.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I studied psychology, and I always wanted to work as a therapist, to really help people understand emotions and unpack childhood trauma, and things like that. But got very disillusioned with academia and realized that they weren't really listening to my take on things. They had a very fixed way of looking at things, that just didn't fit in with my sort of inherent spirituality. So, for example, I'll give you a little story of when I was asked a question in philosophy and psychology, what is more important? Is it the body or the mind when it comes to emotions and emotion, processing emotions and metabolizing them? And I remember saying, well, you can't separate them. They're both connected. One impacts the other, and the other impacts the one. And being marked down by my lecturers, and being told, no, that wasn't the question. And I said, yes, but surely my answer is more relevant to what's true, And so, I became very quickly disillusioned. I mean, that wasn't the only time. There was constant sort of times when I was challenged for my viewpoint because it didn't fit in with mainstream. And so I sort of moved into occupational psychology, interestingly enough, and worked in an organization doing occupational psychology, developing staff in various things around, sort of psychometric testing. But my passion for therapy and helping people and wanting to go back to that was always there. And it was a long journey to get back into that work that I love. So, but I had a whole life working in consultancy and just really playing the game, if you like.
Playing the game, and that's also something interesting. So when you get into this occupational psychology,
Mm-hmm.
it's you're trying to. I remember listening to something you talked about that just as you were probably faced with this this Western way of thinking, body or mind, in your studies, you were
Mm-hmm.
when you got into the corporate world, I'm sure it was the same exact train of thought. Like you wanted to talk about the heart, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's like, well, here we're here to make money. This doesn't have to do with the heart, you know.
Exactly, exactly, and also what's people got to do with it. That was the most, shocking thing. It's like, oh my God, the world is just full of people, and surely they matter before anything else. But I mean, they really, even staff development wasn't really about developing people. It was about how can you maximize profits and how can you maximize productivity. But they didn't see, they were so short-sighted, in some ways, and some, not everybody, but a lot of people that I worked with in consultancy were quite short-sighted about, you work on the people and you increase productivity and you increase profits. And they didn't necessarily get it. And because it was a long game, you had to play the game where you develop the people. The happier they were, the more confident they felt because of the training that they received, the more productive they were able to be. But not only that, but it massively impacted culture of the environment of the organization, because when people were happier, of course, there was an energy, a vibe that rippled through the space that made others naturally, organically feel better as well. Once you have somebody who's toxic, it impacts the whole vibe of the space that you're working in. And I think that now people are so much more aware of it. And the truth is that when I was sort of talking about these things, people were exactly as you said, no, we cannot be talking about heart. You cannot talk about these things. Even meditation, I remember offering meditation and saying the importance of it and everything I'd learned about how scientifically proven it is, that it's an amazing tool. And they were like, no, we're not really interested in that. We really just want you to, come in and deliver your talk on, time management, or how to not procrastinate, or how to organize, or all these sort of skills that, and they were missing the point. There was such a depth that I could have gone into that they didn't really recognize at the time. And now it's really interesting to see how everybody's jumping on board that ship. Everybody is sort of recognizing the importance of heart-based leadership and consciousness and meditation, and developing people in order to really, really increase productivity and profitability, and the impact it has on those around.
So that's the feeling that you have now, that it's arrived. The heart, we accept it. The heart, and taking care of, like, instead of, say, time management, where are you putting your efforts during the day, to say, well, let's what about the hour that you need to meditate so that you can be more effective in the workplace. This is something that showed up in the Western world, in the corporate culture, in your opinion.
I think it's really, really like sort of below 1%, but I definitely think that it's something you can talk about and you're not going to be badly judged like you would have been years ago. Now there is oh, well, I'm not sure about that, but tell me more. There's definitely an interest, and there's definitely a number of, the sort of more younger companies and sort of startups that are recognizing the importance. I think we've got a bit of a way to go with this sort of, very old established organizations like financial institutions and a lot of the big corporates, the blue chip companies. But I think that certainly last year has had an impact where they realize that well-being is something they have to take care of, because if they don't, you know people are going to burn out, an increase in things like ME, increase in, very young people getting heart attacks. We had an incident with a football, I don't know if it's something you follow, but a young football player, supposedly had a heart attack on the field. Very young, supposed, I imagine he would have been fit. So, people are asking the question, and I think there's more interest. I don't think we're there completely. I think we still have to work really hard to get people to see the exact sort of cost analysis benefits. But we're getting there, I think.
It's interesting that you say though below 1%. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's that makes sense because at first it seemed the way you were kind of putting it, like, yeah, it's going, and I was like, whoa, interesting, that's new to me. And then when you said below 1%, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's part of the conversation. You're not being shunned for talking about the heart, but it's
Exactly.
but it's not quite, not even close to 50% of just. It's so obvious if you've found that path in your life. To me now, after I've maybe found this path, I've found it not maybe, like very recently, for just meditation, taking it seriously, like really saying, okay, meditation is something that it's part of my life now. And I think it's even in a social structure, something like if I'm hanging around with the guys, drinking beers and saying, hey, so how was your meditation this morning? They laugh at me, laugh in my face,
Absolutely.
right? And so it's not even close to talking about work. We're just hanging around, and we're talking about whatever's going on. And I say, well, yeah, my meditation today was really good, and I'd get that look in their face, like, okay, man, can we change the topic, because we don't need to go all philosophical and all internal about, and that's kind of the downside I see, even in my relationships, even with my wife. She's more of this pragmatic thinker, and I come around the corner and she calls it, like, I have my philosopher's stone. She's like,
Yeah.
the kids will be like, what's going on? What is Daddy talking about? And she'll just be like, oh, he's having his moment of philosophy, where he's talking about some. I'm a big fan of Sam Harris, so I listen to his app, and I listen to, like, his meditations. And there's this one exercise where you just visualize the things that matter most to you being gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came out of this room where I was meditating, and I came out and I just gave everybody hugs, and I felt like a deep feeling of gratitude that I've never felt before after doing this. And my wife was just like, what is going on with you? You're about ready to cry, and I'm like, yeah, but it's so powerful if you really do visualize it. It's almost scary to visualize, like, these people that are my wife and my 3 kids, them not being around anymore. How bad I would feel, how much I would miss them. And it's such an interesting thing that it hit me so deeply. I'll never forget it. This moment is so, I guess you would say, lucid in my mind. There's millions of examples. I think that's, like, when you talk about tools, meditation is one of your tools. What are some of the other tools that you go into? There's also there's so many types of meditation too, right? It's just,
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, what a beautiful story. And I think that's the thing that people need to recognize, that the mind, is incredibly powerful. And so when you visualize something, it can allow you to tune into feelings. And I think it's a great way to test it out, right? To test out what it would feel like to have something like that happen, allowed you to tap into your feelings of gratitude, that don't take it for granted. This is really important, and we never want to imagine that we lose those that we love, for example, but to be able to have done that in a meditative state and to really feel it it brings you out with a clarity. It brings you out in a space of, or it can do, of course, not everybody has that experience, but
Yeah.
it gives you that opportunity to just feel into it. And so, you know, that would be something I would use in a sort of the opposite way, you
Okay.
know, to sort of say, you know, or just really stop and be present. Because, you know, of course, you know, you probably do appreciate your wife and children and really would have appreciated them a lot after that experience. But imagine if you were to just stop in meditation and just be present, because a lot of us aren't present to what we have. So, you know, if you could go into a meditative state and go, you know, just look around your place, all the things you take for granted because you know that sofa's there and you know that, you know, stand is there and that picture's there and whatever it might be. But what if you took time to just be present with your eyes closed and just walking around and seeing and feeling and the people, you know, and if you've got pets and just really feeling into, you know, what it feels like to have them in your life, or, you know, and just, and you see, the heart and the mind don't understand time, and so therefore everything they experience is in real time. So there's no past, present, or future. There is only what is happening now as far as the mind and the heart are concerned. And so, you know, it's our story that tells us, oh, this happened in the past. It's our story that tells us, oh, this could happen in the future. But when we really tune in, you know, and that's why trauma can be so interesting, because people act as if they're in it in that moment. And in the same way, the heart is able to tune into those feelings of gratitude and that moment of presence. And I think that's something that we all need more of, because then we would begin to appreciate what was really, really important, as opposed to constantly running and being busy and chasing the dream or chasing security or chasing some version of where happiness lies, and recognizing that it can be in the moment. And if it's not, then maybe the real work is how to bring that genuine joy into moment awareness, as opposed to something that we're constantly striving for. Because if you think about the fact that the mind and the heart don't understand time, then if you're striving for something, then it feels unobtainable, because it's always going to be out of reach, because to the mind it's like the wanting is what, you know, the mind tunes into, and therefore the heart creates that, and therefore that becomes your reality.
That's uh that's good here. Like, there are so many topics that you just brought up there that are like, for me, first off, let's talk about the mind. Being not having like only having the now and the present. So for me, like when I think of I've really been trying to figure out consciousness lately.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, how is it possible that matter may give rise to awareness and consciousness to matter?
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Wow. Yeah.
right, like the the central question that underpins everything we care about in life is consciousness, right? Consciousness is everything that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. excuse me. It's everything that we are in terms of our lived experience.
Yes.
It's this quality that makes the people we love worthy of our affection, and it is this quality that makes our failures to love, a failure to love, so terrible, right? So like the it's the quality that gives that sting to missed opportunities, and it's the foundation of every happy and sad moment in our life. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
these, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here from this. These, I can't even take credit for these words, but this is just when I read this, and I try and think about, you know, our mind not having, because basically when I go in my mind and when I'm, you know, quote unquote thinking, I'm not there. I'm not in the moment. If I'm these ideas, these feelings or whatever, something is coming out of nowhere. It's popping up in my brain, and I'm grasping onto it, and I'm holding it, and it's taking me out of the present moment.
Mhm.
And the perfect example is now summertime is coming, the vacation is coming, so it's like I came out of, again, I came out of my meditation room. I think it was on the weekend, like on, or I don't know, or Tuesday morning, one of these, I think it was in the morning. So I come out, and my wife and my son are sitting there on the computer looking at where we're going to go on vacation. And it was just so stark to me in that moment to be like, gosh, they're not even like, it's just so beautiful outside. The weather was nice. The coffee probably tasted really good, and the breakfast that my wife prepared was really. But yet they're sitting on this laptop looking at the pictures and talking about some future event. It's 3 or 4 weeks in the future, and how nice it's going to be, and how great it's going to be, and we're all looking forward to it. And I saw that has such a fallacy of happiness, really, for me. It felt like,
Absolutely.
yeah, uh, yeah. I don't know. That's just that's the weird thing about the mind, though, because it feels like if you were conscious about your mind, just that, or if you don't let the mind just be, it will take you away all the time. Or I don't know how to explain that in any other words. Maybe you can articulate that better, what that is, why are we programmed even to have this, it must have been some type of instinctual safeguard to keep us away from saber-toothed tigers, that we have to be able to plan and get ourselves to visualize the future, because it's so deeply ingrained in us. But it seems today in our present situation, it's not really such a great tool all the time. As it can be misused, or it can create a lot of stress, really. I mean, just preparing for the vacation itself is this whole thing, like, okay, we're going to buy this, we got to get this, we got to pack the car, and we do all these things, and it's like all this stuff is happening just so that we can do nothing, and go on, what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so funny when you describe it like that, and of course that's it's that time of year as well where that's what's happening. Everybody's trying to sort of if they can get ready to sort of plan their vacation and get away and all of this. So but yeah, it's wonderful that you were able to be present to that, and that's the gift of meditation. I think it anchors us in um, really, really tuning into our lives and what's really important, and that's what allows us to have a peace of mind. Because when we're not constantly chasing something or striving for something, and yet working towards evolution and working towards our purpose and being of service, which is important, then I think that we have a peace of mind and life begins to flow very effortlessly. But I'd love to sort of answer that a little bit from my perspective. Um, I think that the trouble is that we have become disconnected with the heart. I think that, this isn't what was intended for us. This is not what nature intended for us. If you think about nature being universal consciousness and this intelligence that exists within us and within the world that we live in, and we are part of the world, and the world is a part of us. And so for me, I feel like what's happened is as things have evolved and we found ways of being more secure. So, for example, where we might have once upon a time, many centuries ago, lived in the wilderness or lived in caves, or we found ways to make that more secure, to fight the elements, So we found ways of having brick houses and brick buildings, and which are heated and air conditioned and all sorts of things, which is important for comfort, which is what we've been sort of driven by as humans. We've been driven to have more and more comforts. But in the process, I feel what's happened is we've disconnected from our hearts. And it's that disconnect with our hearts which has disconnected us from real nature. So as much as we all probably appreciate nature, nobody appreciates sort of getting out to the seaside or to the sea or to a park or a forest or somewhere beautiful for some of the time, but generally, that's not our life. That's where we get away to. That's where we get away in order to sort of plug ourselves back in to nature, to revitalize ourselves. But because of that disconnect with the heart, we sort of got too caught up in a frenzy of doing, that we lost that connection with being. We lost that connection with what really, really matters to us. Yes, it's important to have security, but why? And surely it's about sort of the quality time, if we're comfortable and we don't have to worry about some saber-toothed tiger sort of attacking us, then surely that should give us more time to enjoy our relationships, to enjoy families and connections and people and humanity. But in fact, we've gone the other way. We've become caught up in sort of this consumer world where, we're forever looking for new ways to get people to consume whatever it is that we want to give. So either, service or consume products or ideas, technology. And so, and all, don't get me wrong, all of that is really important to an extent, but we need that life balance where we do that some of the time, and then the rest of the time we appreciate the luxuries that we've built up, because these are luxuries, and really appreciate that they're there for a reason, so that we have more time rather than getting caught up in constantly being on our laptops, on our phones, and new apps and new things. Just really taking the time to really tune into what's important. And nothing is more important than human connection, because without that, we absolutely would not survive. And I think last year, and much of the world being locked down at various points, I hope it really highlighted that. I know some people it didn't, and they just worked more. And I know other people really took a step back and thought, gosh, I want to do more of this. I want to cook at home more. I want to spend more time. And for those who've struggled creating those relationships, the importance of really working on yourself to be able to get back to that place where you have those healthy relationships, and even professional ones. I'm not just talking about personal relationships, but the professional relationships as well. And consciousness is a beautiful part of it, because I think that consciousness will always drive us back to what is true. And consciousness is something that I think exists in a portal between our hearts and the universe. So our hearts, for me, is very much the portal to open up the gateway to that universal consciousness, because our hearts connect with the hearts of those around us, and it allows us to open up to where we need to come back to. And we need to come back to a heart that is clear of the debris of past thoughts, feelings, memories, because that's what keeps us stuck in this mundane wheel where we need to escape our reality. And so what you described of, this need to sort of get away somewhere in the future instead of appreciating the beautiful day that's, present in the moment, is because we want to escape the mundaneness of our everyday reality. And I think that the way we need to do that is not by escaping to a nice location or somewhere out in nature, which, is important. It's more about clearing old energies that are stuck in our hearts that we keep repeating, so that each day can feel new and fresh and therefore exciting. And that is definitely one of the more profound benefits of meditation that I think, the Western world, being more interested in things like mindfulness, they're missing out on that. And that's not to say a lot of people aren't meditating, they are, but there's a deeper connection that is possible through meditation. And I think that people need to recognize that.
It's interesting, this idea of the mundane reality. Um, I I know exactly how that feels. I know how it feels when I get home and maybe I'm alone for 10 minutes before the kids get home or something, and I have time for myself. I have maybe just like a small little window of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just pull out my phone and then the 10 minutes is gone, right? Like I go on the phone and I just go on Instagram and give all these hearts to people that I'm following, and then little clicks, and it's like nothing. It's basically nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe it's kind of nice maybe for the other person. He saw heart, okay. Twitter and all these social networks, they obviously have, that's a whole nother world for itself. But to come back to this idea of being just happy with, or content with this nothingness, trying to figure out that the nothingness, the emptiness is actually where the happiness is. I don't know how to put it in words. I wish I just studied more back in high school or something. I just wish but like a cup of tea, like you have these proverbs where just the small act of cooking my water and pouring the tea, and I do this when I'm in the sauna sometimes. Like I try and just watch the drops of water that I'm in this little spoon that I have to pour the water on top of the hot stones. And just in that moment, instead of just doing it, instead of just taking that water and pouring it on there and getting the effect that I want to have, which is a little bit of steam in there, actually just being really conscious about how I take this spoon and how I find the perfect angle and just let the water kind of drip onto the stones and listen to each drop, and just trying to get almost lost in the reality of this moment. It becomes almost, it's so much more interesting actually. It feels it's so much more fulfilling than anything I can ever find on my phone.
Yes, and I think that's such a lovely example of the everyday actions can be so meaningful, and they are, and that's where we need to learn to let go of the attachment to our stories.
Yeah.
I just have to get a cup of tea and then get on with my day, and while the water's being boiled, I can go on my social Instagram or social media, whatever it might be. And I think you're right. There was a time when it was beautiful because it was really about the content. But like with anything that gets saturated, it takes over to the point where it becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there was a time when you would just look at somebody's post and it would be meaningful. But the more you're doing it, the less meaningful it is because it becomes habitual. And I think that's what I was trying to say, that, the mind has this kind of propensity towards habit. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to declutter from and come back to the heart space where it's not a habit. Every moment is a new moment. Mm-hmm. And a moment to experience something, even if it's something as simple as making a cup of tea, which we all do in the day. At some point we make something for ourselves to drink, a hot drink maybe. But it's really being able to sort of not be in your mind of doing, that you can appreciate that moment of just being. It's just that moment, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so many things that we have to kind of do, right? Like I'm hungry, so I'm chasing after that hunger. I'm going to make myself some food. You have this natural life is there. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
way you can just be like, well, I'm just gonna. I guess you could, right? There are these retreats where you do fast, right? And you get over like you basically say, I'm sitting down and not eating or drinking for, as long as the body can really do it for a healthy period of time. I guess a day or something. You have to drink water, but
Yes.
but to not, but even just to say like into these things, these necessity things, how can I find the the yeah, how can I find this deeper meaning in the most mundane things? And I don't really you can't really search for it because it's already there. That's the thing that's so weird. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's I want to talk to you about awakening and enlightenment. This is something that I feel like for me, it's something totally new again. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that was like a thing, I remember watching this movie with Keanu Reeves, something about, I think he was the Siddhartha Gautama. It's an older movie, and he there was about this Western boy that was possibly the reincarnation of Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called Little Buddha or something like that. It's an older movie, I think from the 90s or something like that. But that was like the last time I remember really thinking about, enlightenment and awakening, and it's just so esoteric when you hear these words. You just kind of shut off and think, well, that's just for people that are in the Himalayas.
Yes. Exactly.
What
Yeah.
how like how can you talk about your own path to awakening and how you look at these things? As like, I know that the heart plays a great role every time you talk. We haven't really even talked about the heart. You keep bringing the heart up, and I haven't really dove into that. But yeah, I guess. Oh,
It's all part of the same thing. So we've talked about it in lots of ways. I guess it's really understanding, but I think enlightenment is a wonderful way into really, really talking about the heart. See, enlightenment is for everybody. It is ultimately the human path, and that's where everybody's going, whether they recognize it or not. And it doesn't mean to say they're going to get there necessarily, but that is, for me, from my perspective, the ultimate sort of destiny, and that is the ultimate purpose for being here. Everything else is everything else. It's just the sort of hero's journey. It's just about us being on this journey, and we all have a unique individual path to get there, but ultimately the there is enlightenment. Because when we think we're looking for security or success or happiness or wealth or the relationship, or finding purpose in what we're doing and all of those things, ultimately it's about finding that real joy that is not shakable, the joy that is sustainable, and it comes without any attachment, and it comes without any conditions. Each of us is looking for that. We just don't know that what it's called is enlightenment. We don't know that what we're trying to get to is basically a place where we are light. We are light in two ways. So we are light in terms of we're free of the burdens of the heaviness of all the past things that we're holding on to in our bodies and in our hearts. And we're also looking for the light in terms of out of the darkness. So we are looking to not have this constant yo-yo which life gives us, the paradox, of, one day life is great and the next day it can be, terrible. And so most of us are in between, so we're not extreme, but we all have this up and down. Some days are wonderful and other days something happens and it feels like the end of the world, or it feels like, it's a terrible day, or whatever it might be.
mm-hmm.
And what we're really, really wanting to get to is that space and place within ourselves where there is genuine lightness, where there is an acceptance of what is, and a genuine gratitude of all that we have and all that we are. And the way to do that is recognizing that this is the work that needs to be done. There are no shortcuts as far as I'm concerned. And for a very long time, people have looked outside of themselves for that sense of lightness, for that sense of, well, if I just have enough money, if I just have enough success, if I just get promoted enough, if I just get this big house, if I just get to go on holiday in this place, if I just get this love that I want, if I just have the children, if I just have the, this constant wanting, when we realize that what we're really, really wanting is to go deep inside and to let go of all of society's structures that tell us this is the way to happiness, because what we're looking at is somebody else's path to happiness. For somebody else, that is absolutely their pure joy. And so nothing that we're looking for is bad or negative. It's just going within ourselves, clearing our heart of all our ancestral patterns, clearing our heart of all, the centuries of residue of things that we think we need or should have had or should be, and really come back to just who we are in this moment. And when we clear a lot of old energy, we clear a lot of our energetic parts as well as our physical parts, our physical bodies as well as our emotional bodies as well as our energetic field, the more we are going to find what really makes us happy. And some of us will be surprised at what it really is, because it won't be what we've been chasing for a long time. You hear these stories, like the reason why people think that enlightenment is for, those in the Himalayas, is because often people have had to let go of material things in order to find themselves. And I think we can now do it on this planet without letting go of material things, appreciating the material things we have, enjoying the luxuries that we have in the world, because, most of us are very fortunate to have, what certain people in other countries may struggle to, and really be able to go, and yet I want to be of service. And so what is it that I'm really here to do? When we clear our hearts of all the things we think we need to be secure and happy, then we find what it is that's really, really going to give us that sense of joy and purpose. And that comes from being of service. And it's got nothing to do with how successful are you, what's your, bottom line, how much money have you made. It's got everything to do with the joy that you get from genuinely giving, and then the prosperity flows. And so enlightenment is not what it used to be. Enlightenment is not about giving up everything and going off and living in the caves, and meditating all day, every day, and really getting to that space and place of lightness. Enlightenment now in the modern world is really about letting go of the old patterns that are being held in our hearts, so that every moment in life becomes joyful, even the most mundane.
These old patterns left it. So yeah, you've said that a lot of multiple times, and every time you say that, I think it hits me pretty hard, because I'm thinking like, okay, it's kind of like for me when I take the peel the onion, and I kind of go these layers down. I've had these kinds of experiences through edible, what is it called?
Plant?
The THC,
yes. Yes.
Kind of using an external trigger there, because it's kind of a shortcut, right? It's like, well,
yes.
I'm just gonna do this psychoactive drug that's going to reveal some deep things about me. There's a therapeutical way to do it. I know that it's kind of it's a new thing that's coming back now, that psilocybin and LSD, and I think the other one is this where we were talking with Barbie. She had this she had this other type of, she had basically an IV set when we were doing the interview the other day. She had an IV of ketamine. Yeah, exactly. Which, like, yeah, I the thing is, regardless of what those doing, I understand that this is all like an external way to maybe shortcut, and it's not gonna get you there any faster. It might just bring up these like you said, these things in our hearts that we haven't let go of yet. So basically it's clouding our everyday moving forward, our judgment, because we haven't touched base with the things that are driving us, that are in our subconscious. And if you haven't taken the time to reveal them to yourself, then they're basically what are controlling you.
Well, absolutely, yes. And I can see why people are, because I think what it does is it opens up another world. You can't imagine a world outside of the physical world we're living in. And so I think a lot of people are now, very interested in sort of a lot of the plant-based medicines, journeys, cacao, ketamine, so I can, and hemp, and, I can see why people are sort of turning to that, because again, it comes back to what I said earlier, that we've disconnected with our hearts, and so we don't know how to get there. And so what this sort of external thing does is it allows you to get a glimpse. But I think that the danger can be that, that becomes the hook. It becomes a thing that they do in order to get to that place. And I think it's recognizing that we can get there organically. And it's not as difficult as we would think. It's not years and years of therapy. It's really, because so much has shifted on this planet already energetically, we're at a place I believe, in our evolution where things are happening very quickly. Time is going super fast, and so we can get to that organic kind of openness very quickly, but people need to be, I guess, educated on the fact that it is possible, and there are tools. And so, the tools are sort of real deep meditation, but also one of the ways that I sort of teach meditation, I have a course called Art of Fantasy. Okay. And it's about how to use your imagination, but in a very conscious and very constructive way, so to connect with where you want to be and begin to really fully feel into it and align the heart, mind, and body, so that fantasy no longer exists just as a fantasy, but becomes a reality. And so, there are tools like, the kind of yoga that I do, which allows people to get there organically. But of course it's work, and it is work, but as is, doing plant medicine, because when you do plant medicine, you still have to be really ready for it.
Oh, yeah.
And ready to sort of deal with whatever comes up for you. But I can see why people would turn to it, because if you can't imagine a world that exists outside of the world we're currently seeing or living in, then something has to be able to open up the mind, and that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to, if I know, the thing was, I was in California back at home, and it's become legal there, so I was able to go to the shop and buy like cookies or whatever, and I had never done that, and I thought I knew what was coming, and all of a sudden I have this really deep introspective moment where I'm like, oh gosh, like there's no fighting it. It's just there. Like these emotions are just coming up, and these things, these undone situations. I remember the next morning waking up and like calling somebody and saying, hey, I just wanted to call you and say I'm sorry about that, and he's like, that was like 8 years ago, man. Like, I'm over it, and thinking to myself, like, gosh, and then realizing it after the moment, like going, oh, that must have been like, that was really just an eye-opening experience. But I think the interesting thing in my own life, the way that it worked positively for me, was just because the pandemic hit, and I found breathing with Wim Hof, and so it created kind of like this perfect storm for me to go onto this meditation path. And now I can look at it in a sobering point of view and look back and see that yeah, you're totally right. I think the it's almost like the dangers outweigh the positivity, especially if you're somebody that like you don't know how you're going to react, or if you have a type of schizophrenia, THC or psilocybin, all these things, they all sound great because the people talking about them have had these great experiences, or they've had bad ones, but they're able to come out. But you don't talk about the people that have had bad experiences and never came back, or so it's an interesting field, but I also totally have a huge amount of respect for it. And I think it's something simple to me was the breathing. So when you're doing, I imagine your yoga a tool to help people and open up their hearts and open up themselves to past problems or issues that are controlling them on a subconscious level. Is that more? Yoga has always been a big breathing thing. Do you guys? Do you see that is part? That has to be part of a yoga practice. I just.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so fundamental to living. So, and so many people don't do it right, which is really interesting. And, very, very quickly you can tell what people are struggling with just by the way that they breathe in, and they think they're perfectly fine. So it's really interesting to watch. But I just have to say, I agree with you. I think there's a huge amount of respect for the fact that people are finding ways. Nature is incredible, and so anything that exists in nature is here to support us in one way or another. Even the sort of poison ivy has a purpose, and so I definitely think that natural plant-based medicine is definitely something that is useful but I see it as a bridge to help open people up to the path that they then walk on with, using lots of different tools as well as that, but not to become addicted to that, to not feel like that is the only way out, because it's not. It's one way, it's one tool, and I think it's a very effective tool, but like you say, it has to be done in a very kind of controlled way, because if people experiment with things they don't understand, even with certain yoga, you can't just be experimenting with it. You need the guidance, because it, if you think about our bodies, they're incredible. Our bodies are just incredible and complex, and so things have an impact, and when you do something you can't always undo it. So I think it's important that people have a real clarity as to why they're doing something and what their intention is, so that they don't have the bad experiences, because what will come out is what's in the heart. That is true of all of life. All of life is simply a mirror of what is held in our hearts. And so, if you have a bad experience, it's because your heart is quite full with stuff that needs to just be really sorted out and cleansed and released. And if one of the ways that you can open up to possibilities is through plant medicine, then it's a wonderful thing if it does open up possibilities.
One thing I would like to come back to, you mentioned when you were talking about material things, and how it was an interesting perspective that you had about saying, well, it's not necessarily that we have to let them go. There is a certain feeling. I had this recently with a car. So my wife's car, we have like a second car in the family, and it was a leasing car, and it was like my favorite it's like a little go-kart, like one of these newer Mini Cooper, originally out of your neck of the woods, right? And it's just a fun. It's black. It's cool. It's like got this typical material aspect to it that I totally indulge in. Honestly, I just have to say, like, I indulge that. I like that, and then it was time to give it up, because the leasing was over, and we kind of, every time that the lease, it's like a 3-year or 4-year period, whatever, and it's coming, and so we made the decision to not get like a new one. Like we're not going to re-up and get the newest version of it. We kind of felt like it was a little wasteful. Plus the pandemic, I think, was kind of, I don't know if it was coming or there was some type of financial, like, okay, let's just kind of just chill out a little bit and see, and just see how the cards may fall. And we ended up reducing down to like this tiny little VW Polo, like the smaller VW that we already had kind of in the family. And it was an interesting experience because it felt really freeing somehow. Mm-hmm. Like just that when we made the decision and the car was gone and I'm driving this other car, we still drive it to this day. I don't know. I feel like I got one up on everybody else that's driving nice, expensive cars. Somehow, it's weird, but it's like even though I definitely still, like, when I see a nice Mustang driver, I'm like, oh yeah, I could picture myself driving that. So there's like this dichotomy there, and I wonder what that is. Like, I wonder why it's so. What am I trying to fulfill when I buy something expensive and nice for myself? Like, what am I trying? There's something open there in my heart that's not come out yet. There's something I'm trying to make up for, and I make up for it with the consumption of something nice, something that's expensive, and it's a status object. So there must be some type of insecurity that I'm trying to make up for there, and I still haven't figured it out. I just know that it felt good to have the Polo, and it feels good, but it also feels good to drive a really nice, expensive car. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess ultimately it's sort of, and this is what I mean by, when we're really in our hearts, we make the right decisions. I think there was a time when it was great for you to have your car, and then there was a time when it was right to let it go. And I think it's about being discerning and making choices in the moment. Unfortunately, I think, yes, there might be a sense of, some insecurity that needs to be worked through. But also, I would say, there's always a possibility that, it's society that puts a price tag on things, And so it's society that says, well, this gives you status if you have this, very rich, expensive car, rich looking expensive car, or designer brand, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a point where we might be coming from ego, which is an insecurity, where we want it because it looks good and people will see it as a status symbol. And then there's also a point where actually, I do believe very much, I'm very spiritual, but I'm also very, very much into prosperity. And I think that, we are here not to diminish ourselves and to not, deny ourselves or deprive ourselves. We're here to experience a full abundance of the world that we're living in. And I think the thing is that it shouldn't come at a cost.
Yeah.
So it's about, the ethics and the sustainability. And so maybe there's a part of you that is sort of wanting that powerful car because of ego. And maybe it's because there's something beautiful and luxurious about being in something that is beautifully created and, exceptionally crafted and powerful,
Yeah.
So
Powerful.
I think it's about sort of, discernment, and it's also about sort of really tuning into your heart and feeling, why would I want to do that? Because I have the same, I only drive a small little city car, but I would love to get behind the wheel of an incredible car, and it's, there's nothing like it when it's smooth and it's powerful and it's, it's just easy to drive. There's something about beautifully made, anything that's beautifully made with so much love, and a lot of expensive things are made with so much care to detail and attention to detail, and so yeah, I think maybe check in and see why it's something you would like.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I'm testing myself to see how long I can hold out on this Polo, and then I mean, but yeah.
Exactly, because the other thing is that it's probably, that probably isn't as easy to drive, right? As in,
Yeah, you
it's
do know.
easy.
Yeah, it's true. You notice that it's not. You're right. The engineering of a expensive car has a
Mm-hmm.
quality to it that's actually beyond any type of ego or status symbol. It really is the actual experience of the physics of a car. It,
Exactly.
yeah, or like you said, it could be any. It could be an airplane. It could be anything. I guess
And anything beautiful, yeah,
really.
anything beautiful. And again, I think, beauty is a big part of spirituality. The world is meant to be a beautiful place, and we're meant to have beautiful things. But I think it has to have longevity. So, I think I would rather have a beautiful piece of furniture that's expensive and lasts a lifetime
Right.
versus something that's, throwaway but cheap, and so I'm not chasing the expensive, but at the end of the day it doesn't last as long, so it's not as sustainable.
Yeah, there's I like this when you add the word ethics to a decision about material things. It has a different quality to it where yeah, and fine made furniture must have a higher cost because someone again, put the years of experience into building that furniture and used solid materials and high quality materials. So it's going to cost 5 or 6 times more than the couch from IKEA that
Yes.
that after one move you're probably going to have to just throw away because you can't put it back together again because of these pieces that were used were so you know it's just cheap. It is cheap. Although I have to say they did. You have to give IKEA some credit. Some of their stuff is actually pretty good for
And
mass produced
absolutely,
furniture.
absolutely,
But
and affordable for people. But I think it's the fact that you want things that last,
yeah,
because I think that's a different choice then, isn't it? As opposed to fashion fads where you get it for a year or two and then throw it away because there's new fashion. And I think that's probably more destructive to our planet, and therefore not in line with enlightenment. Getting to that space and place of being really light.
all right. So I've got this last thing I want to talk to you about before, because I think I don't know how much time you brought with you today, but I don't want to overstretch my boundaries. the
Thank you.
It's really nice just to have this conversation with you. I feel like there's just you can just go into depth on everything, which is it's opening. It's almost an egotistical conversation in a sense for me because I'm getting so much out of it. I feel like I'm having my private session with you right now. um, but you mentioned service. And service is one of these things where I also struggle with it, and I assume that a lot of people do too, because it becomes like this. Like we all know what the word means. We all
Mhm.
know, like the logic of it makes sense to me too. That if I serve, it's an interesting thing though. Like if I'm in service and I'm helping people, um, the promise is that I actually get more out of it. So it's almost actually a egotistical. It could be if you go at it with the wrong motives. It could actually also be an ego like philanthropy. How do you say that? Philanthropy,
Philanthropy, yes.
philanthropy, or there is also an egotistical aspect to that. But the true service, the service that is really coming from the heart, where you're ready to, everything is work. You've got your internal, your heart is good to go, and now you're able to reach outside of yourself and truly make an impact in someone else's life. Um, this is the service that I know you're talking about, but it seems there's quite a conflict, even like when I have Eric here in the office with me, and Eric came into my life, and We and I knew, I was like, well, I could use him. We could use each other. He needs money. I could use someone to help me with the studio. It becomes this relationship where we're kind of helping each other out and have common goals. And but it's also, there's a lot of points where we have to get to know each other. It's a whole process of figuring out, okay, who is this working out? Is the relationship itself in a good balance? It's tricky. It takes energy. It was a huge learning process for me. I feel like he's now like my son, an extended family member, and
Mhm.
and he's older than my son. My son is 8 years old. So people say, well, that's like it's like your practice run. I get to practice all my mistakes on him. He has to, because he's 20 years old.
Mhm.
And I'm just going. I'm getting close to 40, so he could be my son. And I don't know. It just turns into this whole thing where I realize that there is a certain aspect of it that's challenging. It's challenging for both of us.
Mhm.
And that seems like where I'm at with service. Like how do you navigate going into preparing yourself, or even being able to provide somebody with a service that really does help, and it's not just an egotistical, mm, you know, yeah, it's not just an
Yeah, and like
egotistical.
ego driven. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just about the ego, and so it is tricky. And I guess the short answer is this is absolutely my intention with really, really educating the world about the heart energy. And I know there are lots of people now, like Heart Math in America, doing stuff, amazing, amazing work with heart coherence and talking about it in lots of different ways. But for me, from the spiritual angle, you take out the sort of science because, a lot of Heart Math, for example, is great because it's the research and the science behind it, but you bring back the spiritual element. And really, for me, I can honestly say that what I have learned in my life, throughout my life, is that the more I am in my heart, the more life flows easily and effortlessly, and everything that is right just comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
The right moment, the right people, the right service, the right attitude, the right intention, all flow from when my heart is in a good space. And I'll be really candid with you and really honest that, I've had a number of very close deaths in the last few years, and especially last year, nothing to do with COVID, but of course exacerbated by the COVID situation. And my heart struggled,
Mm.
and that's when I noticed that life very quickly became a struggle, because as soon as my heart was not flowing with love and the joy of life, and of course being locked down, not being able to really really engage in the world that I would like to, in the way that I would like to, I realized that there is a profound impact when we're really centered in our hearts, and our hearts are pure, and we have to keep on cleansing them. So our hearts are never fully pure because there's always stuff that comes up, and we're always triggered by different things, and different memories come up at different times, different challenges come up at different times in our lives. And so the more we do the work, which I've been on a journey ever since I was young, to really keep clearing the heart, clearing stuff that comes up, writing, journaling, the yoga practices, really, really knowing myself, knowing my truth, getting to my truth, finding my truth, expressing my truth, and releasing everything that is not true for me, really understanding my motivation and understanding my intention, and checking myself when my intention is not right, when my motivation is not healthy and driven from ego, then life begins to flow. So we find that we can be of service in a way that is natural and really, really not transactional,
Mm-hmm.
but interrelational.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is that There's a difference between a transaction, I will do this for you because you will do this for me,
Yeah.
versus I am going to do this for you because this is what I have to give. And you meet the right person who says, and that's wonderful because I'm ready to receive that and I'm here to give you this. And this is what I have to give. And your heart says, and I'm open to receiving that. So it becomes a relationship, and it becomes this interrelationship that you create, and then things flow easily. I'm not saying you won't have challenges within that, because of course you will, but it becomes a beautiful flow. And when life is flowing, then it becomes a beautiful place to be. And every experience, each and every experience, each person we meet, each situation we encounter becomes beautiful. However, when we're not really centered in our hearts for whatever reason, and like I say, with all the years of work, I was definitely thrown, and I saw and felt the difference in my own life. So I am absolutely speaking from experience that there is a tangible benefit to working on the heart space and clearing the heart space, where all of life becomes easy. So you don't have to ask that question.
Yeah.
How can I be of service without ego? Because when you're in your heart space, you just know. There's a knowingness and a wisdom that flows from that place, and that's really the journey we need to be on, to really know ourselves, so we know when we're coming from a not healthy place, and we put it right quickly. And hopefully the more we do the work, we attract the people who also get it. Now, not everybody has to do the work. So for example, Remington, you were talking about yourself and your wife, and you're one way and your wife's quite pragmatic, you're quite empathic. And that's fine, because not everybody has to be an empath, and pragmatic people can equally be just as spiritual. It's not about naming it and saying I'm spiritual and I'm in my heart. It's about being in our hearts. And if we're in our hearts, we just know. And when we know, then things just flow from that space. And that's where I feel I would love to guide a lot of people. I see a lot of lost souls, a lot of lost people, and especially in the business world, especially in the sort of service industry, in whatever service, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, because people struggle with knowing who they really are. And that can only come from really, really diving deep into really clearing the heart space, really finding that clarity, that purity, that truth that resides in your heart, because then everything you do comes from a beautiful place, and therefore we create and co-create a beautiful world, and that's what we really need.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's nice to hear that you even as far along as you are in having this practice of clearing your own heart, that it's also not easy for you. That's very nice of you to share that, because I think a lot of people have that's part of the struggle with doing this, is thinking like, well, they get demotivated because it's not so easy. And it's to understand that even people that have been doing it for years have to deal with that, is maybe be kind of nice to know that, okay, I'm not alone in this. It's not easy for anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The journey, the spiritual path is not linear. It's quantum.
Yeah,
And therefore,
linear.
one moment, we're right there, and we're on the sort of edge of pure enlightenment, and then the next minute we're sort of almost back to square one, and we're not, because we're always evolving, because it's not linear. So evolution is not you keep going up and up and up. It's up and down and round and in and out and all over the place. But all of it is leading us to that ultimate space and place of being really light, being golden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Yeah, I think I think I would like to come back, because I do have still the whole issue of free will.
Okay.
Because that's a, but maybe we can come back another time and talk about that. I can create some notes because I've been also trying to meditate on that and learn about what it means. Do we have free will?
Mhm.
Is it an illusion, or is it? Yeah, that's just such a topic that's really hard for me to digest. And I think
Mhm.
that some of the best ways to go through these things is to really just talk about them and see what kind of pops up in your heart, or in my mind. And I'd be interested
Absolutely.
to see what you think about that, but I think maybe we should save that for another time.
It
uh,
would be wonderful.
yeah,
It would be wonderful. Can I just share with you before we
please
we
do.
close today? Is you definitely have a very beautiful empathic heart. Even before I jumped on the call, I had a live event yesterday, and and I knew I had, and so it was a late finish because we didn't really get out of there till about 9:30, and so by the time I got back home, and but from yesterday, I just, my heart was just in a beautiful space, and I could just feel the conversation we were going to have was going to be one that I would very, very much enjoy. And that's a lot to do with your energy, because I would have felt it even before, because I tune in before I jump on these podcasts, and I could feel it. And I have to say that it's absolutely been the case. It's been such a pleasure. You're such a good listener, and genuinely very heartfelt in your listening, which makes it really easy. So thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. That's one of the best compliments I've had in a while. I really, yeah, I guess it is something that has to. It's an interesting thing to open yourself up like that. Um,
Mhm.
the way that you said that last night, that you can even tune in.
Yeah.
That's something interesting to do, to actually to tune into this. It's almost like before you do something, I find if I have fear about it or something like that, then I block it off, right?
Yes.
And
Exactly.
if I don't just let it kind of happen, and if then because you're afraid to open yourself up, and so it comes across. I mean, we've all had these conversations where you're just like, gosh, that wasn't. It's the opposite, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that's a lot to do with, being of service. When two people are genuinely in resonance, and it just flows. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really wonderful.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, I have to say
Pleasure.
it the same. I have the same feeling. I don't know if I'm as good as you are as getting in tune with that, but it's something that I'd like to even maybe I'll try that out a little bit, just to try and tune in before, even the day before, just to see where it's going. Usually, if you really are able to quiet yourself, you probably do get a. I can imagine you do get a feeling, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it takes practice to be able to just recognize it immediately. But yes, it's great. I definitely recommend you try it. And your podcast guests hopefully will feel it, whether they're conscious of it or not. Yeah.
Okay, well then, again, thank you very much for your time, Hema. I look forward to sharing this with the people that are on our channel and on your channel. Hopefully, it brings something to their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you've definitely touched me, so I appreciate that very much, for your openness and honesty in this conversation.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. You have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.